13 Questions by Mantranscending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
This week on the 13 Questions podcast, we're going to be chatting with Gordo over in Ireland, the host and presenter of the Conspiracy Guys podcast. Those Conspiracy Guys podcast. Chum around with our other show, the Grimerica Show. We've had him on there, and we're friends on Twitter and all that, and seemed like a good fit for the show, and he turned out to be a great fit. The trend continues of not being able to find a bad interview for the 13 Questions podcast, and I suppose that's probably got something to do with the types of questions we're answering. Like I've said before, I think the only way you really... We're asking, yeah. I think the only way you get a bad interview is if you get someone that starts giving you inauthentic answers or tries doing some shielding or maybe trying to prop themselves up or something like that. I could see that going off the rails a little bit, but we've been lucky. We're 10 or 12 or 13 shows in, and we haven't had any of that yet. And Gordo's no exception. Gordo is not the exception to that rule. His answers are fantastic. His bonus extension is fantastic. If you haven't got the bonus extensions yet, Gordo's is worth signing up for. Just head over to 13questionspodcast.com, hit the sign-up page. There's a bunch of different options there. There's $7 a month, $77 a year, $777 lifetime. That's going to get you instant access to a new RSS feed, which will give you every past released episode in its entirety, which is the 13 questions plus the 5 to 7 bonus questions plus the wrap-up. So you're instantly going to get access to hours of content there in the back catalog. Every new show that comes out, 2 shows a week, you're going to get the bonus questions and the extension. So you get 2 extensions per week. You're going to get, we've already got some open source content coming in. So, I can already see that 6 months or a year from now, we're going to be overloaded with content. So there's going to be a lot of bonus episodes going into that 13 questions feed. And you know what? I'm already thinking that there might be some people that I want to interview in this space that maybe some of our other shows aren't really lined up for that could come up. So I could see us maybe throwing an interview maybe into the bonus feed from it. When we have a few more members, maybe we'll throw an interview every couple months into the
What do you mean, like
with
the person that would have done the 13 questions, but it's just an extra?
Yeah, kind of like maybe we'll take a past episode of 13 questions and do like just an open style interview. Like we've had a couple of guests say, hey, let's do something less scripted. Yeah. Which might be fun with a few of them, Just different ideas for bonus content. Of course, you're also going to get instant access to the communication courses. I know Joe Root emailed me right away, and he's like, holy fuck, these courses are fantastic.
Oh, that's great.
So there's the 5 TJ Walker communication courses worth hundreds of dollars, over 100 hours of content there. You instantly get access to that. As soon as you sign up, you get access to our live private Discord, get access to the members-only forums, and all that. And probably the most intriguing thing people are saying so far, I was actually talking to a friend of the show, Garrett Lee. He's going to go out this weekend and interview a couple people. But we're going to open source this thing. So if you know someone and you think that their story should be told or they should be immortalized or we should get them on the internet, maybe you got a grandpa that's getting up there in years or an uncle, a great uncle, and you're like, he's got all this wisdom and it never gets, you don't want to be like trying to remember what he said.
Yeah, and you're like, maybe you should be on a podcast, and then you don't have to like schedule things in and do it. You can just do it at your own time.
Record them.
Yeah, we'll kind of put out some audio standards, that kind of thing. But it's pretty easy.
We're working on a page right now. It's pretty simple. It
pretty
won't be
easy
that
to
hard.
do now. Yeah, you can just do it on your own time in your own comfort of your own home, and then send it into us, and we'll put it in the feed.
Yeah, and we'll immortalize it. Maybe you want to customize a bit. You can throw your own bonus question there and the extension.
That's a good point.
And we'll release them into the feed.
And of course, you got to be a supporter to do that.
You have to be a supporter. And you have to be a supporter of the 13 Questions podcast. I said a couple people got confused. They were supporting Grimerica.
Oh, yeah.
But you do it's 2 separate entities. So best you do head over to 13questionspodcast.com. Sign up for a monthly, a yearly, or a lifetime membership. Get access to all that stuff. Become a member. And do all that fantastic stuff. And you might as well just do that now. Shut this episode down. download the members section, and all of a sudden this exact episode you're listening to right now is just going to get 35 minutes longer.
Yeah.
Poof.
Yeah. And that'll have Gordo's bonus answers in that conversation afterwards, right? About what it was like to do this. And there's some pretty good questions and back and forth about the whole process afterwards.
It's been pretty exciting process so far. It's getting people are liking it, and people that you aren't expecting are interested in it. Yeah, it's been quite the ride so far. We hope it continues. We hope you guys sign up. And we hope we can build this community into something fantastic. More than anything, we hope you guys find some value here. And we hope you really enjoy Gordo's answers. Check out his podcast, Those Conspiracy Guys.
So Gordo is the presenter, producer, editor, and technical powerhouse behind Those Conspiracy Guys. He's a former comedian and a latter podcaster who also dabbles in writing, music, photography, and filmmaking. And he can also dance, but not well or very often. There you have it.
There you have it. Enjoy Gordo's answers, guys. You're going to love them.
All right, welcome back to 13 Questions. My name is Adam. Today we're going to be speaking with Gordon Rochford. You ready to start, Gordon? Or is it Gordo?
Absolutely. Gordo, you can call me anything you like, just not early in the morning. It's all good.
Great. What was the best advice ever given to you, and would you modify it at all today?
Yeah, I sent these questions and I had to really have a good long kind of like a contemplation time, lotus position job, trying to think of all the best advice that I was ever given. And people that say like take a half and wait 30 minutes and see how you feel, or these kind of like bits of trite advice. But probably the one that stuck with me most was from one of my college lecturers called Jerry Johnson. And, I was doing the podcasting business for myself for a couple of years, and I ended up going back to college, and he was a project management kind of professor or lecturer, and his advice was always be innovating. If you're not innovating, you're dead, unless you plan to be a lost leader, which is kind of impossible in the creative realm. Unless you're Joe Rogan or something, you can do whatever the fuck you want. But innovation counts for ideas as well as products and services, and innovation will bring you to scary places, and you'll nearly slow down maybe because you're afraid, like, geez, I've innovated too much. This is too different and mental, and nobody else is doing this, and you could be the first, like out in front of everybody, innovating your ass off, and you look behind and there's nobody near you, and it gets scary, but that's the time when you really have to push on through and wait for everybody to come in behind you. If it looks like or feels like it's succeeding, then it probably is, and go with your gut and the rest will follow. Like true innovators are the ones that are doing stuff that nobody else is even thinking of starting. And that's kind of what Jerry said, like, always be innovating, trying to make something new, kind of akin to Jack Donaghy and 30 Rock, I'm always innovating, looking for that third kind of microwave heat.
Nice. What was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
I listened to the Duncan Truss episode of this podcast. I'm a conspiracy guy, and Duncan would be in that kind of realm. So that was the first one I went and clicked on, which is a great episode, by the way. And he talked about learning a lesson off his parents by default. It wasn't something that they were like, now, little Duncan, here's some sage advice from mommy and pop. I ended up getting a kind of a life led in risk aversion. So the lesson I probably learned best from my parents was to not be afraid of risk. Not that they didn't turn out great or they raised me right, and they're great people and they're brilliant parents, but they're quite careful people, and they're mildly fearful, as good Irish country people should be. But I was the kind of kid who was like always coming up with harebrained schemes and, risky behavior, and look at this thing I just made, like the fucking lemonade stand kind of vibes that you get from these kids, just trying to make a quick buck so you can go down to the you can get into the shop and buy some candy. I was buying and selling guitars and musical equipment and organising gigs at 14 and 15 with lads who were like 19 and 20 in my local town in pubs and kind of music halls and stuff, coming in going, "Hey mister, how much would you play your guitar for me?" It was real what the fuck is this child doing? It was to avoid fear around risk, and to try and not be afraid. And later on, when I started taking loads of drugs and all, like the paranoia crept up and all the fears came in, and it was always there, but I was just trying to battle it for so long, and not let risk aversion stop like decisions about stuff that could be super positive, which I think is a lot of people's problems. Like they end up going like, I want to be happy and I'm happy now. And if I risk trying to do something different, I could be happier, but I could fuck up what I have now. So it's like the sit or stay in poker, or in blackjack or poker, whatever you want to play. But if you're gonna hit or stay, like I'm a hit kind of guy, and you end up busting. But like, I'd rather be crazy and poor and have tried than be safe and in the middle.
What book has been most influential on your life and why?
I really tried to come up with something profound for this because I saw so many there's so many guys. It's like, yeah, Ayn Rand or some kind of businessy book that was like, this revolutionized my business. But it was two books from when I was a child, because that's obviously the time when you're most susceptible to influence. One of them was Lord of the Flies. I don't know if you read that one.
Oh, absolutely. So that one fucked my mind up when I was a kid. I really identified with the character of Piggy. And I don't know, like, I've read it and watched the black and white movie and then watched the movie in colour from the early 90s. And like, we studied it in school then, and I was like, Jesus. It really hammered into me the knowledge that people given the opportunity can be immensely cruel, and that most of the rest of the people will just follow along and do what they're told because they don't want to be singled out as being different. And I was like, well, that won't be me. And then I see what happens to Piggy at the end when he's like, guys, do you think we should be doing this? And then they smash him to bits with a rock. And his glasses, they pick up his glasses lens and they start a fire with it and all. And, being the glasses wearer and being like rotund, mildly obese, I really identified with that. I was like, shit, your mates will kill you if you get stuck on an island. But yeah, it was the nature of people and that whoever just takes charge is in charge, and you have to take it and you have to fight to keep it. And if you're not willing to fight, no matter how righteous or right or, I guess virtuous or whatever you are, people will still take your power if you let them. Do you know? The other book then that heavily influenced me was a Roald Dahl collection of short stories. I absolutely love short stories. It kind of feeds into my mild attention deficit disorder. But it was the eponymous titled The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. Don't know if you've ever read that one. Have not familiar.
It's a deep cut. It's a deep cut. Roald Dahl. Henry Sugar was a well-to-do doctor who worked in a hospital in India. And one day a fella came in and he said, I need you to glue my eyes shut and put like plaster over my eyes and then like bandage up my eyes and then give me a certificate of authenticity so I can go out and I can perform. He was a traveling performer who could see without his eyesight. And he had studied under the yogi masters and done all this stuff. And a lot of it was like staring into candle flames and meditation and all this. But he was able to do parlor tricks and he was able to see through walls. He was able to see through the backs of playing cards and stuff like that. So Henry got super interested in this and he was like, oh yeah, let's do that. He started practicing, found a book that this yogi guy went to study with the yogis in the forest and in northern India. And he acquired the power of sight beyond sight. And the first thing he did with it was go and win a few hands of cards. And he won a few pound. And your man said, if you use these powers for bad, you'll die. And he got the few bob and he kept it in his room and he didn't spend it. And he laboured over this. And then he eventually ended up throwing it out into the street, and all these people were boxing the heads off each other trying to pick up the money. And the police came and said, you can't do that. You have to put it into a proper charity. So he made a charity. he turned it into like a multi-billion-dollar industry where he would go to all these casinos all around the world dressed in different disguises and clean them out like some Robin Hood with this like sight beyond sight, right? And he took all that money and he put it into orphanages and he put it into like, charities, billions and billions of dollars. And he had loads of people working for him and everything. And then he thought that was saving his soul. But his last days were spent naked in front of the mirror, using his X-ray vision to watch a clot travel through his arteries and into his heart. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. And then the story just ends. And you're like, oh, Roald Dahl, you're breaking my heart. So there's so many like lessons in that for me as a young kid. It's like, you can use your skills for money, but if you don't, and no matter how well you use it, you're still going to die. So there's mortality in there. There's like, should you use a special gift acquired illicitly for good, or could you just like feather your own nest and for like and take a shorter life like Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix? Like so many lessons in those books. But Henry Sugar is definitely something that you should give to your kids to read. It'll give them a scare.
I like that. Have to add it to my reading list.
It's very juvenile, but it had a massive effect on me. I ended up sitting in front of candles. Like, it gives you all the instructions in the book on how to get this sight beyond sight. It goes through the whole thing. So I'm at 10, like, staring into candles, ruining my eyesight, trying to do it. But, like, Roald Dahl was a sick fucker in the best way possible. Really dark books, like, for kids that... I think maybe David Walliams is my little nephew is reading, the David Walliams books, and they're, pretty sick, like snots and poop and farts and all these kind of stuff that little boys like to read about and laugh about. But Roald Dahl was the OG, the witches and George and Giant Peach and all that stuff.
What daily habits or rituals do you have, and do you recommend them to others?
When I went back through college, I ended up at the term I use is smoking out. I smoked out of college 1 year before the end, before I got a degree about 15 years ago, and I never went back to finish it. And in 2016, maybe 2016, I ended up getting to go back and do my degree, my last year, and I got back into my old college through serious kind of reapplication and effort to get back in on the course. And I ended up getting back on it, and I really wanted to do well. So I was reading all of these productivity books, and I'd be kind of a nerd for that stuff anyway, like tech and productivity and using these apps. And one book that I found was The Deep Work System. It's a book by Cal Newport. And I was listening to that on Audible on repeat. And really it was like an affirmation of the system of work that I already had in making my podcast, Those Conspiracy Guys. Because the sheer amount of, like, I guess, unintentional research that I had done in my life already before I even started the podcast, like lashing encyclopedic amounts of conspiracy and political and historical information into my head, trying to, put together all of the different links and trying to keep that all in the front RAM of my brain ready for access. And, Cal Newport basically, like, he tells a bunch of these allegorical stories in the book of people who do deep work. It's like concentrating on one task intensely for hours, and how you can do that, how you can push away all distraction. And I was already doing that in my research. I was looking deep into stuff, and I could stay at the computer for 15 hours. I've a really scattered brain usually, but when I get into this stuff and I use this deep work system, so I would do that every day. Like, I'd sit down and I do my social media first thing, and then I get into my emails, and I'm hacking through hundreds of emails, and everything else goes away, like bodily functions, hunger, like everything just goes by the wayside. I also have another system that I use. It's called Timular by Zai, which is the opposite of my deep work. So when I'm, you know yourself, like when you're editing podcasts or whether you're making stuff online, and you have like videos rendered and you have audio rendering, or you have, you know, a website processing something that's, you know, slow. I flick to another task. I flick across in the MacBook to another screen. And what was happening was I was getting lost in all of these tasks so deeply. So Timular by Zai is this little kind of octagonal shape. It's like two pyramids on top of each other. And you turn it over for whichever task you're using. So I would do like 4 minutes of this and 8 minutes of this and 11 minutes of this and 4 minutes of this. And I'd swap them back and forth. But for me, when I was doing a job, I was concentrating on that, and when it was loading, I'd go to another job and then come back, and a job I think would take 2 hours would really only take 45 minutes, and I did an hour and 15 minutes of other work that I hadn't registered as doing, and I ended up feeling empty and useless and not efficient until I started like meticulously cataloging minute by minute my work. So like, I'm not sponsored by Timular, by Zai or anything like that. But like, you can go and buy one of these things, and if you're that kind of worker where you'll skit from job to job and do 4 minutes here and 8 minutes there and 15 minutes here, that shit adds up over a work day. And I was doing 12, 14 hour days, like with the podcast, because it's, you know, enjoyable. You get into it. But some of it, I was coming away going, I feel like I've only done 3 hours. And as soon as I started counting up what I was doing, I was like, holy shit, like I can't believe I did that much. So if anyone out there has that skittish work ethic or work pattern, something like that, something like Toggle or Harvest or Timular by Zai are 3 really good apps for measuring every minute and maximizing your time. You know?
Great. Sounds like a good thing to add to workflow.
Yeah, big time.
If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most and why?
Ironically, it would be letting people have their chance to talk. I need to listen more. I find I have to sometimes re-clarify myself when I ask questions, especially when I'm doing the podcast. Like our show is like 4, 5, 6, 7 hours long sometimes. And we do an off the fence section at the end. And my questions have so many semicolons. It just goes on. Like run-on sentences, and people are trying to answer, and you know, because it's conspiracy and because it's subjective information, the reclarification of all this stuff, I have to keep on kind of going, no, well actually, and isn't that now, maybe now, you know. So I do interrupt quite a bit, but I find I work best with other interrupters, and you know, it's the alpha conversationalist. Another thing a best friend might say about me is that I need to work on how much time I attribute things in my head. Like I was talking about the workflow stuff. Like I think something might take 20 minutes when actually it'll take an hour and a half. And I'll be back in like 20 minutes. And then 4 hours later, I'm like, phew, that took a while. So what's the crack? And they're really mad because the movie theater's shut. Do you know? That's probably the best answer for that.
What are you most curious about?
This is an easy one. If aliens exist, or where humanity really came from, or the actual history of planet Earth, like are we the progeny of genetic manipulation between godlike aliens and some kind of weird hairless water monkeys? Did Enki and Enlil from the Anunnaki come down and, you know, fiddle with a couple of the good-looking monkeys, and you know, we are the progeny of that? I was recently looking up something called RH negative. I don't know if you're into conspiracy theories, but RH negative blood is like this certain genotype of human. Apparently, there are different species. A lot of famous people have RH negative type blood, and it's basically if you have two people that one is RH positive and one has RH negative blood, then they can't have a baby together because the baby growing inside the other person will be seen as like an infection or a foreign body, and white blood cells will tear it apart. it's apparently from this Anunnaki, like genetic engineering, and so many famous people, like all the 27 Club, like everybody who's like, all the film stars, like so many people like Marilyn Monroe and Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and everybody who's famous is RH negative. So they said there's some kind of special thing about them. But that's what I'd like to know, is where humanity came from and how many times have we done this? Do you know? Like that scene in The Matrix and Agent Smith is like, Morpheus, we've done this before. We've tried this before. We made the world perfect, but your feeble minds couldn't handle it. Like I definitely believe that's what's happened.
So you wouldn't be surprised if things were infinitely cyclical.
Oh, absolutely they are. I believe it. I just need to know. That's what I'm most curious about. And just tell me.
That means the origin answer is merely a point on the infinite map of anything.
Absolutely. I feel like
that's a fun way to think.
If I had a Carl Sagan, like Jodie Foster in Contact type of moment, where for me it was like blip, like a quarter of a second, but I had like 10 hours of static and some kind of existential experience, I wouldn't tell anybody. I'd be like, I swear I won't tell. Just let me know, and I'd be happy.
What was the most embarrassing experience of your life?
I've expected a couple of the guys on your show to be like, oh, it was when I was speaking in front of a crowd and my voice cracked, or it was when I made too much money that one time. Like, I haven't heard like a really embarrassing moment on any of these shows when someone says, it was really embarrassing. Something that still like puckers my arse when I think about it with cringe is one time when I was about 6 or 7. For no apparent reason, I was at home on my own. My mom and dad were working, so I had the house to myself, and my granny lived next door. For some reason, I just took off my pants and I got up into the windowsill. And it was a really cold day, and I pulled my butt cheeks apart and I touched my butthole off the really cold window. And I was just like kissing the window with my arsehole. And my granny walked in and caught me. And I got down and there was like a kind of a greasy smear, like some old woman had kissed the window with Vaseline on her lips. And I just wiped it off, and my granny was like, what were you doing? Like, she couldn't, it was something that she just never seen before. And I was like, I don't even know why I was doing it. I don't even know. There's no explanation. And the two of us like never talked about it until until she died. Like, we didn't talk about it again, That was one. Another really embarrassing moment, and it took me a long time to get over, was one night I was with a bunch of friends and I took too many ecstasy tablets all in one go because I thought I was a big man. And I had done a lot of talking about, I'm fucking great at taking drugs. And then I took a load of drugs and then it didn't work out at all. And then I had to sit there for hours really not having a good time. And it was very obvious that I wasn't great at taking drugs after all my bluster. And all the guys in that house were like, the fucking state of you. Look at the state of you. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm not good at taking drugs. I told lies. And that was like, that fundamentally changed my personality. Like, that is life-changing cringe. That took, like, I got PTSD from it. Like, it took months, if not years, to get over that night.
Do you think any of that could have been because you're also under the influence? And I think of people like Paul Stamets, who talks about neural growth and pathways and regenesis, where you can regrow the brain, that your state of mind in certain states might cause you to, I don't know, entrain something physical within your brain?
I felt parts of my brain explode, like popping sounds. I got mad deja vu. I thought that I was dying and I had made peace with God and I had made peace with whatever part of my life I had experienced at that time. I was smoking copious amounts of hash and, taking kind of amphetamines on and off. But like, my brain wasn't in the fittest state. And I think it just blew that gasket. Like it went through a kind of went through the ceiling of what I was capable of thinking, and blew something out. And I didn't take drugs for years after that. Like it stopped. It was like a death and a rebirth. And I guess that's kind of what it is when you take acid, or you do DMT, or like people are being prescribed now psychotherapeutic amounts of MDMA and psilocybin, and like we're only a stone's throw away from all of that stuff being legal. Like I read today or yesterday that they're making ketamine available for kind of psychotherapeutic use. Ecstasy is being used to treat PTSD. Acid is being used to treat depression, and it's like a one-time thing. It's like, there you go, have some acid, and like we'll see you in a year. See how you get on. So like, I do think it was a kind of a self over medication, but also it was super embarrassing to be like in a fit, sweating on the bed, going, I feel like this has all happened before. Did I just say that? Oh my God. And the lads are like, have a drink of water. Do you want to get in the shower? Like, fucking relax.
But meanwhile, you had one of the most traumatic experiences of your life that followed you, and
of my life. Yeah. It was so embarrassing though. Like it was so, it really marked me. Like it scarred me, but I think I needed it, and it pushed me on to another level. Yeah.
What is your greatest fear, and how did you overcome it?
I think it's like not having security. Like I said earlier on, like my parents were quite risk averse people, and I was kind of raised like that. Even though I started drinking at like 13, sneaking drinks, and getting into pubs, because I was quite a big child quite quickly. So at like 15, I was able to get into bars and get served, and security was probably part of all of the fear, like that you have to have a permanent and pensionable job. You have to do well in school so that you get good results to get into a college, and you're walking a well-worn path. And if you deviate from that path, like the consequences will be dire. And there was always like, the way in these small towns, there's always these cautionary tales that people will tell you, like, you don't want to end up like this guy, or do you want that for a life? What about this guy? And I was like, yeah, but he fucking looks happy, man. That guy he's out of his face, but he looks happy. And you don't really realize like the social construction around those type of people. But it was probably the biggest jumping off in the last while anyway, was leaving a kind of a permanent job that had a good ironclad contract. Like I worked in a shop where I had a really old contract that was almost like indestructible. I could have had a shit on the floor in the middle of the shop and I couldn't have got fired, kind of way, there was customers coming in, and there were a certain demographic of the populace, let's say lower economic status, and they weren't exactly polite. So they'd be fucking, here you fucking give me abuse. And of course, like you fight fire with fire, I started giving them abuse back. And people were like, Jesus Christ, you can't do that. And I was like, well,
I can.
You are? Of course you can. But it was a permanent job, and I was like, it was secure, and no matter what you did, it was going to be there. And you turned up and you drudged, and you trudged through it, and it was. And the biggest fear was like leaving that, because if you left that, like you might never find that as good again, or you might go into something that you don't like. So you're again that throwing of the dice, that hit or stay from blackjack or poker, I can't remember. But like leaving that job to go into another job with a friend of mine who was running a web design company. And I worked there for 9 months, and then I ended up getting the opportunity to go back to college after trying for 3 years to get back in. And it was 2 big moves in a row. And I was like, oh shit. Like I left one big thing to go into another job. And I was happy there, but I wasn't fulfilled. And my friend who ran the company, she knew that I wasn't fulfilled. And it was kind of, I went like, this isn't working out. She's like, I know. And it was like Do you know when you go in and you get like an operation, the first cut is hard, and then the second, like when they go in for the checkup, it's just like taking out the stitches. So the first one was like the cut, and then leaving the second job was like taking out the stitches. And then I ended up going back to college and learned so much and experienced so much, and ended up getting like, you know, financial independence because I had the podcast, and Patreon were generously, you know, paying my salary basically for being a podcaster. And it was the first time in my life when I was making my bread from the fruits of my labor, like I wasn't working for somebody else for the first time ever at like 32 or 3. You know, it was super scary but really liberating. So that's probably the greatest fear, was no security, and I overcame it by just fucking tucking my balls in and going for it. Like,
who were your role models?
When I needed it at the time, it was probably the character of Kenny Powers from Eastbound and Down, and the story of the spirit of Rick James from the Dave Chappelle show's Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories. And I was coming into a time in my life when I wasn't like my own personality and my own achievements and all the things that I had done, while, you know, on paper, quite impressive to somebody who, you know, is easily impressed. Yeah, quite impressive. Played music, like been on some bands, like made a load of concerts, did a lot of gigs, was a stand-up comedian, was doing all this. But I still wasn't really feeling it inside, so I wasn't acting like it. So I just I took on the persona, a little bit of Eric Cartman, a lot of Kenny Powers, and then like when I'm past like 9 or 10 beers, then Rick James started to come out, and it was just like, you know, help me get out of my head and stop me feeling so, I guess, restricted. And it shook loose some of these like societal barriers that I had, and it helped me to act like I deserved the things that I had, that I got here by my own grift and my own sweat. And, you know, when I walked into a room, I was like, I'm here, motherfucker. This is my room. I'm here now. What's going on? The party didn't exist before I got here. And I had that when I was young, and I absolutely didn't deserve it then. But I spent so much time like boxing all the way and telling, you know, like a Japanese housewife, just being like, oh yes, okay, like deferring to everybody else. So I was just Rick James and around the place, and I was drinking loads and doing loads of drugs and running around the town till 6 and 7 in the morning looking for a party. And I found a few. Do you know, like you go out drinking in one city and then you wake up like 150 miles away in another city kind of nights out. Like, great crack, great fun. But I had to dial it back after a while because, like, you know, cocaine's a hell of a drug, as Rick James himself says. But if you act like a rock star for a little while, even if you're faking it, or even if it's like some split personality braggadociousness, like if you're able to fake being a rock star for a little while in a place where nobody knows you, like you can use that kernel of the memory of being like that to power your self-confidence engine for years to come. To put that little kind of dark matter engine core inside yourself and go like, yeah, you did walk into rooms and people were like, but who's this motherfucker? Like you're just like doing finger guns as you're walking in, like walking in backwards, doing the choo-choo train, high-fiving all the people that you don't know, and they'll high-five you back and they're like, he must think he's somebody. So they treat you like somebody, and you're nobody, only in your own head. But it fucking works, man. And yeah, Kenny fucking Powers.
Awesome.
There's a way more like prolific and you know, austere serious answer to that, but that's, when I thought about it, that's probably the person I admired the most at the time.
What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
Probably political correctness. I think it's a cancer on political discourse, on just like the duplicitousness of it, the deceit in its existence and its utilization. It's a bunch of people who have been disenfranchised for so long, who now, instead of trying to get equality, are trying to get power through a moral framework of brow-bet vocabulary. Do you know? It's the thought police, and they're fucking dragging the arse out of life. And it's leaning into news media. It's leaning into every single movie, every single TV show. The debates around every fucking, every piece of media that's made. One side are saying, this represents this. And then the other side are like, I'm not watching that shit anymore because there's too much fucking this in it. Do you know, the talk around the Captain Marvel movie, and, you know, Jussie Smollett trying to start a fucking race war with two fake MAGA hat wearing Nigerians. Like how far does political correctness have to go before everybody just goes, come here, this is actually a waste of time? And there's people fighting back against it, and they're getting called the wrong thing. There's people, you know, there's echo chambers being formed, and people are becoming heroes because of their virtue. And, you know, there's artists really leaning into this, like, wokenomics. Like, I have to speak up for the little guy, and, you know, I'm all about race, and I'm all about gender equality and all this stuff. Like, a lot of that stuff is very short-lived, and it's not going to make money for much longer. But I think the element of political correctness and the element of I don't like saying it because I made a New Year's resolution to not talk about it anymore, but the cultural Marxist agenda is ruining media, it's ruining news, it's ruining political discourse, it's breaking up friendships, it's got social media totally fucked by like separated into two polar opposites. And if there's something that could change, it'd probably be that. Now, in saying that, the reason that thing exists is because of inequality and the various isms, and, you know, all the bad actors, I guess, in life that are being dickheads and treating people not as they should be treated. But that was always the case, do you know? And if in return for that, everybody, like, it's a ideological Bolshevism where there's a small group of people that control everybody else and at their thoughts and actions, so that they won't be, like, subjectively offended. It's no better than the Holy Roman Empire, or, you know, some Orwellian dystopia. And it's going that way, and it's not stopping, it seems. But I don't think it's going to last much longer. There's a lot of people who are being quiet about it that are starting to speak up about it. And I think the 2020 election is going to show a lot of the woke folk that people won't stand for that shit, man. Do you know?
So you're seeing the same type of social change over there in Ireland as you do over in the States?
Oh yeah. We have a plan here. You can watch loads of videos about it. I'm not going to shit on it too hard because, to be honest, I haven't researched it as hard as some other people. But you can look up. There's a YouTuber called Dave Cullen, Computing Forever, and he talks a lot about this Ireland 2040, where they're trying to import a bunch of. You see, even you say the word immigrant with the wrong kind of tone. It's like that Louis C.K. joke. It's like, Jew is the name for the race, but it's also the slur for that race. It just depends on how you say it. It's like, oh, that guy's a Jew, or that guy's a Jew, you know? So if you say, like, these immigrants are like those immigrants. So immigrants coming over to Ireland. Ireland is a small country. It's 4 million people, like, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. And they're planning on putting 500,000 non-Irish nationals into that population. And by 2040, that's going to be up past 1 million. And, you know, they're saying, like, multiculturalism is great. Ireland has been under the yoke of the Catholic Church for a really long time. And it was a super dogmatic, super serious ideology. And, you know, it was so bad that, like, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, even right up to the 70s and 80s and 90s, there was something called the Magdalene laundries, where if a 16-year-old girl went out to a dance and she got the ride and she got pregnant from it, that her family would give her up to the nuns as a kind of an involuntary incarcerant, like a prisoner, and she'd have the baby, and then they'd sell the baby to rich Americans or rich English people and keep her in the laundry as a kind of a half nun prisoner, where she'd wear like a nun's habit and she'd do the fucking laundry for all of the churches and all of the religious organizations all around in the village. Like, that's barbaric, do you know? And then we throw off the shackles of that in the 90s and start to become a little bit more kind of loosey-goosey. But in Ireland, we still have, it's been voted out now, but we still had a blasphemy law up until this year, where you couldn't talk shit about the church or you'd be done for blasphemy, and it was a €25,000 fine if you printed some shit about the church in the media. Like, that's some autocratic, authoritarian control right there. So, like,
yeah, especially in this day and age with all the improprieties that the Catholic Church has been doing, which, I mean, too horrific to even ignore.
Yeah, isn't it the best way to stop criticism about it is to make it illegal to talk about it in the media? Like, till this year, that was the case, you know. So, if you're talking about a dominant society or a dominant culture, like Irish culture has fought for years to try and release itself from a kind of a degradation or a suppression. And as we created our country in the early part of the 20th century, around the creation of the nation, there was also a cultural reformation or cultural revival, where they had like the Gaelic games and the Gaelic language, and there was like poetry and song, and Irish was being celebrated, the language of Irish. And I mean, it's not as popular today. We still have like Gaelic games and all that stuff. But if you're going to introduce a super dominant society and a super, I guess, like partisan society like Islam, which is a religion, not a race, you know, if you invite all of that into a country, like, you'll see what's happening in England, where there are whole sections of England that are allegedly unwelcoming to white people. Do you know? Like, that's all spurious information. That's those conspiracy guys kind of talk. But it's you know, there's definitely a conversation to be had there about that, and this Orwellian kind of thought police around it. Like, you can't even question it. Like, our Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, he's the son of immigrants, and he's also gay, and that's a pretty diverse leader to have. For a country like Ireland, we were the first country in the world to pass same-sex marriage by referendum. Do you know, like, there's an awful lot of progressiveness that's gone on in Ireland. We just voted abortion to be safe and legal here through the repeal the 8th, which is a repealing of the 8th Amendment to the Constitution of Ireland, which was written half by a politician and half by a very powerful bishop at the formation of the country. So you can imagine, like, the Constitution of a country written by a religious figurehead. It's going to be pretty conservative. And we had to live with that for years, and there's still parts of it that are fucked up. But slowly but surely we're reforming those as a nation, and kind of looking back on previous societal transgressions by authoritarian regimes, and then turning around and asking another authoritarian regime to come in through the back door. Do you know, like in America, they're looking at like Muslim doctors performing female genital mutilations on little girls, you know, and that's surely not right. But it's just as not right as performing circumcisions on boys as a normalcy. Like, it's the mutilation of kids' genitals, and doing it to boys is totally acceptable. And that was, for a while, probably protested against like 50 years ago. And now it's the norm.
Well, that's actually a good thing to point out. I mean, anybody who has a problem with genital mutilation should immediately have a problem with circumcision. And that's a cultural thing. And it points back to what you said before. You know, if you're going to have a large amount of people from a different culture come into your society, integrate, that's fine. but you have to look at some fundamental differences. They pick girls, we pick boys. Do we really want to double down on that? If you start allowing people in that have different beliefs and ideals, they are going to homogenize, and you have to accept that. And so it's not saying it's bad per se, but if you do it, you're going to have to accept that if somebody comes in with certain laws that they hold to be true, they're going to try to, it's like anybody else. You push your beliefs on your environment. And when they are,
if it comes in such a big wave as well, like the amount of people in such a short time,
and when things can run so completely incongruent, there's some cultures that just, there's fundamentals when it comes to sex or religion and the consequences that are just not acceptable in most countries, that in some are the norm.
Yeah,
it's
and they're kind of feeling some of the effects of that in England right now at the moment, and they have this whole Brexit conversation, and what really is Englishness? Like, what is Britain? What is it like to be British? A lot of people are like, oh yeah, curry chips and all, and it's like, well, that's from the East, you know. Like, there's these things that are quintessentially British, but right now there is a question of nationality, and even having this conversation would incense some people online. Like, the facts are there for some of these things. Other parts of this conversation you and me are having even are spurious conjecture at best, right? But there are certain factual and objective truths in the things that we're saying. But because of political correctness, if this was a YouTube video, it'd be demonetized. You know, if this was a podcast on a liberal network, that bit would probably be asked to be edited out. You know, it's a question of subjectivity, and the few speaking their power to the many. It's not about the actual meritocracy of lifestyle, or the meritocracy of thought, like whose way of life is better. It's that it's a struggle for power, and if they're able to use morality to get people online, like terms like being on the right side of history, or, you know, this is what is it? Equity of outcome or equality of outcome, you know. Mm-hmm. These type of terms that are being thrown around by the likes of Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin, Sam Harris, these guys, like, those are things that people need to go and look into to find out what's happening, because a lot of people don't want to talk about this because it's really complicated, and there's got a lot of reading behind it, and there's a lot of things you have to understand about the history of how long this shit has been going on since the 60s and how it's evolved through the 90s and through the college system and all this. But there's a lot of that stuff that really needs to be looked into before you end up with a Patriot Act of the mind, do you know, where they can put you on blast on social media, contact your employer for something that you said outside of work, and go, this guy said this thing, and then you lose your job. Like, that's power, and it's using a morality based policing system to exert that power, which means that you won't say the things that you really feel, which is essentially control. So it's morality in control, which is totally wrong in my opinion.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
You know what? I thought about this for ages, and I could not think of something courageous that I'd done. And I asked my girlfriend, it's like, what's something that courageous that I've done? And she said, starting that podcast and making it your full-time job. And I went, no, it's like saving a puppy or something out of a fire. And she's like, no, that's a reaction. That's a fight or flight reaction. Like, one day, the story I wanted to tell was 2 years ago on Valentine's Day, I was going through Dublin City. It was like 5 p.m, you know, the hustle and bustle, everyone's finishing work. Men scrambling for flowers and cards, picking up the scraps, you know. And I was gleefully walking along with all my Valentine's gear in me, the crook of my arm. And I was walking across O'Connell Bridge, which is the biggest bridge over the River Liffey in the middle of Dublin City. And there was maybe, like, it's maybe 15 abreast on the path, on the sidewalk. So it's 15 people deep to a wall that's about 5 feet high, and it drops down into the river. And I was walking along, and people were on their phones and they had their little thing. And I looked up, and there was a dude, and he just put his hand on the wall and threw his legs up over the wall and sat on the wall for like a second, took a big long breath, breathed it out, and just plopped over the side. And I went, and I put my hands up. I was like, and I looked around, thought I was hallucinating. I was like, did anybody else see that shit? And nobody moved. And I was like, there was like 10 seconds where nobody did that, and everyone was just moving. It was Valentine's Day, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Did that lad just jump in the river? And then I looked over the side, ran to the wall, looked over the side, and I couldn't see him. He's gone. And I was like, if I don't do something and nobody else saw that. And I rang the police. Well, I rang 999, and I was like, quick, there's a lad after jumping over the bridge, and he's in the river. He's in the Liffey by O'Connell Bridge. And she's like, do you want police or fire or ambulance? And I was like, whichever cunt is going to pull him out of the river, just send those guys, please. And then the fire brigade came, the police came, and they sent a little boat out from the end of the river, and they fished him out of the thing. And I ran over to one of the ambulances just parked it. He wasn't in it, like it was just parked there. And I was like, get on the radio, like, is he still alive? And your man went, yeah, he's still alive. And he just drove off. And then within like 4 minutes, they'd all come, pulled your man out of the river, and they'd all disappeared back into the thing. And I was left standing on the middle of the street on Valentine's Day with everyone just flying by me. And I was going like, I wonder, does that lad even know, like, that I saw him, or did he hope that someone saw him to save him at the last minute or what? Like, and it sat with me for days. And that was my story of courage. And I don't think that's courage. And Claire, my girlfriend, said, like, that's instinct. Courage is doing something that you know may be difficult or may fail, and doing it anyway. So, I mean, it depends on your definition of courage. She says starting a business and leaving your job and making a success out of a podcast that's pretty controversial, and having it in a format that's not really traditional, and, you know, giving it everything. And now we're going to America to try and make some video documentaries, and we've done a GoFundMe and got 35,000 euro, and, you know, we're on the way to going across the whole of America, you know, making a bunch of documentaries in a car. Like, that's maybe courageous. It depends on your definition of courage, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Not everybody is scared of the same thing. Some people, courage is going to be picking up a spider. Some people, it's going to be speaking in person. I mean, it's one of the most amazing things, and you've said it, nobody says public speaking. You know, it's something you can get embarrassed at doing, but most people that are out there speaking their voice, that's not something that cracks them. But some people, it's beyond death. It's the most frightening thing that is.
I've been doing that shit for years, so that's not like, it doesn't feel bad to me, you know. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. Since I was a kid.
Do you have any particular rules for yourself that you never break?
This one I found hard to answer, but it's something practical. I always have my phone battery fully charged. I always have either a charger in my bag, or I have those Anchor portable battery packs, or I have like a little pencil one I keep in my jacket. So I never, ever, 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 ever run out of phone battery. If ever anyone listened to this, if I've ever told you, oh, sorry, I didn't ring it back, my phone battery died, I was lying to you. My phone battery is never, ever, ever dead, ever. And I think that's part of the kind of the fear thing. Is what happens if I need to get out of here? But also it's like, what happens if I need to look up an answer on Google to prove somebody wrong? So that's maybe why. I think though that like some people that talk about like within an answer like that, they talk about discipline, like getting up at 8 o'clock every morning, or being in bed before midnight, or not eating after 7 p.m. or something. But like, humans are so regimented with that stuff. Like, if you don't allow yourself a little bit of wiggle room, like when you break that habit, you're off the fucking chain then. You know, it's an excuse, and it's a human nature. Like, you're like, no man, I'm not going to eat any bad food. And then you have like 2 potato chips, and you're just like, you're like Cookie Monster, you know. So I haven't drank alcohol or smoked any weed for 8 years, since the 11th of January 2011. like I'm sober for 8 years. And it's not that I never ever drink or smoke weed again. It's just that stuff in my mind doesn't exist for me. Like, I'd never be going, oh geez, I'd love a glass of wine, or I'd love like a cold beer. I'd love a smoke of a joint. Like that just doesn't exist for me, you know. And I don't feel that I need it. But if there was a rule that I wouldn't break, it'd probably be like if someone's offering you a drink, just be like, no, I'm grand. Because it doesn't exist, so it's not a chore for me to say no to. But yeah, probably the phone thing. That's a weird answer.
No, it's a great answer. It's especially in today's world when, you know, even from a safety perspective, you've been in a situation where you could save somebody's life by having a communication tool when nobody else was paying attention. I can see why you would find, I mean, it's that would ingrain in me too.
I didn't put those two answers together just until you said it there now. Yeah, maybe it's the safety thing. Maybe it's like, you know, it's my rape whistle. I might have to tweet about something.
What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
Oh shit. I guess like, what qualities should a man strive for?
It's almost a double entendre question. You know, what does it mean to be a man in today's world, or to be a man in today's world?
The answer that I got for that was to be authentic. Authenticity. It's like, it's the thing that'll make people gravitate towards you the most. It's the thing I've worked on the most in the past while. I mean, in the past like 15 years. Like I told you, you know, I was an imaginative child. I'd tell fibs. I'd make up harebrained schemes and stories. You know, there's a certain element of white lies in managing people where you're like, oh yeah, man, that was great. Yeah, come on, let's do another one. And then, of course, like telling lies about being a big man, taking drugs and all this kind of stuff. So, like, there's so many other little fibs and lies, and everybody does it. You know, these self-aggrandizements and these. It's like everybody's writing the CV of their life like every day, and someone's like, "Hey, how was your weekend?" Well, and you have to like dust off the fucking inconsequential nuggets of like the last 72 hours to try and make a story out of it. So the people are like, "How was your weekend?" "Fine." "Okay, that guy's weird." Like, it doesn't. Everybody should strive to be as authentic as possible, and if your authentic isn't interesting, strive to be more interesting, and then be authentic about it, I guess. Like, I've been real mindful of my own authenticity and trying to like cultivate it without it being a marketing tool or a marketing ploy. So I'm the presenter of a show that essentially is trying to find the truth about what people call conspiracy theory, let's say. But it's more about like it's called Those Conspiracy Guys, and it's about conspiracy theory and like what the definition of that, like what is conspiracy theory. If you can have one part of it that's true, then it's no longer a theory, it's a conspiracy. You just have to find the rest of the evidence. So like I'm trying to find the truth online, and the remit of our show is to scan through all the stuff online about a certain topic, filter through the bullshit meter, try and find out what we believe, and put that forward then as a narrative with a certain point of view or a certain thesis. So like we do history, we do like different celebrities, and it's not just like JFK and aliens and fucking, you know, Project Rainbow and shit. But I think the authenticity part of it, to have my opinions be my own and not be afraid to say them, and also not be afraid to be corrected or to be wrong. Like this dogmatic approach to truth in a very subjective environment that we live in now. People are going, this is my truth, and I feel that this is my, and it's like, yeah, son, but that's only for you. Like, that's not for the rest of us. That's what you think. You think that you're a wolf and want to have sex with other wolves. I don't have to think that. I don't have to believe you. You just do your own thing and fuck a dog if you want. It's not up to me, boy. Do you know what I mean? So authenticity, to be your authentic self, is probably the most valuable thing that a man can be because there's no duplicity then. There's nobody calling you a liar. There's nobody doubting. When you say something, you mean it. There's nobody looking for a hidden meaning, or there's no duplicitousness. There's no scheme behind it. No, I'm not saying that women are inherently, inauthentic, but there's a certain element of you go into an Eddie Murphy stand up and it's like, that ain't your hair. You ain't that tall. You ain't that pretty. But like, there is a certain element of a facade of and that's fucking the fashion industry and all their bullshit. But for a dude, like, you want a guy to be able to shake your hand and go, I got you, man. This is the thing. Like, snap, and believe him. Do you know? Like a gentleman's handshake used to be the epitome of manliness. You could trust a man. You could trust like your whole business on a handshake and a masculine type nod. And I think that authenticity is the quality that probably yields the most return. It yields loyalty, it yields trust, and they're super important when you're talking about like leadership and all this kind of stuff. Like one question, I don't know if you're going to ask it, but it's what quality do you admire most in a man, was one that you sent, and I put in leadership. Because I said, like, if you can encourage people to work together for a common goal, that's way more powerful than like forcing one person to do the smallest task against his will. And being authentic really aids in that. Because like, if you're authentic, it's like, we're working together and you're looking at your boss and he's an authentic dude and he's saying, I'm in this with you. Like, if he's inauthentic, he's a fucking corporate shill, just a head in a suit, you're going to be like, yeah, whatever. Like, own my own earnings, fuck off, I'll do what I want. But if your boss is authentic and he's good with you, like, he's a real person, you can tell him your problems, and he'll, you're not afraid that he'll go, oh yes, oh okay, all right, and then the next thing you're fired because of something that you told him. It has to be recognized. Authenticity has to be recognized and not utilized. It has to be encouraged but not compelled, and it has to be refined but not standardized. And I wrote that and I read that from writing it, but that's as succinctly as I could get it. Like, authenticity has to be recognized but not utilized. Like, don't use it like a marketing tool. Encouraged in others and in yourself, but not compelled. Like, if someone doesn't want to tell the truth or be authentic, like, leave them. There's some shit going on. Some people can't, and it's find your own authenticity and find your own version of it. Being authentic is not the same for everybody, and some people won't be authentic about everyone or everything in their life. So some people can be more authentic than others. There's no standard of authenticity, and every little bit helps, But be real and be true and combat the fake news of life by being more authentic, I think, is the things a man should strive for.
Love it, Gordo. Unfortunately, unless you're a member, this is the end of the regular 13 questions. We do have bonus questions coming up here in a minute. But yeah, Gordon, that's it for the first part. I'd like to invite everybody to head on over to 13questionspodcast.com. Like I mentioned, you can become a member, get access to the premium podcasts. We have communication writing courses, prompted journaling exercises. There's community forums, a lot of cool people in there hanging out. And of course, you get the rest of the bonus questions coming up right here. All right, welcome back to the bonus round. You ready, Gordo?
Bonus, baby.
Awesome. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
You didn't give me that. I don't know. I guess probably boobies. No, I guess probably forthrightedness. Like someone who's instantly who answers genuinely, who's not withholding. Someone who's like, no, prove yourself.
I don't want no whole night. I Har jag wanna ha vänner, yo va? Har jag wanna ha vänner? Har jag wanna ha vänner, yo va? Har jag wanna ha vänner? Har jag wanna ha vänner, yo va? Har jag wanna ha vänner? Har jag wanna ha vänner, yo va? Har jag wanna ha vänner? Har jag wanna ha vänner, yo va? Har jag wanna ha vänner? How you wanna hold when yo
why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo
Why is
why?
there innocent people locked up for life? While some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when
Why?
How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when How you wanna hold when yo why? How you wanna hold when How you wanna hold when yo why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.